I lived with an eating disorder for 6 years, and that was just a coping mechanism for all the internal struggles I was going with. Our body is an information source. It's trying to communicate something to you. So pain is communication. Any ailment that our body is expressing is some sort of communication of showing something that's going on deeper under the surface. But if we just ignore it, suppress it, or put a band-aid on it, then we're just perpetuating the cycle. And just to realize that you have so much power within you to heal.
Hey everyone, thanks for tuning into the Vibrant Soul Society, The Conversations. I'm your host, Baba Sam, the Miracle Man. Our mission for the show is to remind you that you are greater than your thoughts, and beyond your thoughts is your vibrant soul. So today we are very honored with a very bright, vibrant soul with us, Dr. Kelly. Welcome to the Conversations.
Thank you so much for having me.
All right, so let's dive in. So people are unaware of you. Who is Dr. Kelly?
Yes, I am a physical therapist by trade, but that is just part of the journey. So really the journey for me was I did not even realize for most of my life was abandoning myself in so many aspects of my life. And it was really when I gained some clarity, I can look back on my journey and realize that I wasn't even here for myself in so many situations. And so who I am today is a very different version than who I was several years back. And it's only through all those trials and tribulations that I went through that I realized that I had to go through that to see myself in a different light and just continue on my growth path and realizing that I'm worth my own love and I'm worth having a voice and I'm worth pursuing my own desires in my life and even just being aware of my own desires in my life.
Can you give us some more examples of how this plays out?
Yeah, 100%. So it can play out in so many ways. I can share some ways it played out in my life. One of them was I would abandon myself in relationships. So I allowed others to kind of dictate the way the relationship would go. So I would silence myself, not say what I was actually thinking. I would just stifle myself just to keep the peace. So if the peace in the relationship was there, then it meant that I was doing my job and I was worthy. But I would never actually speak up for things that I felt were either right, that were right by me and aligned to my values just to kind of keep that pace. I finally started speaking up, and unfortunately, they unraveled when I did. And I realized that I was really just going through that like fawn response of trying to play nice in order to keep everything at bay. That was one way it showed up in my life. Another way is perfectionism. So always having to be perfect, trying to make sure everything is just so that the external world, if the external world is okay, then it must mean my internal world is okay. And that was never the truth. That never is what actually happened, but that's what I thought. Fear response that I see now, that I was thinking if I could control everything, then I'll be okay inside. That was another way I abandoned myself. Other ways is just completely neglecting my own self-care. So just working hard, day in and day out, feeling exhausted, feeling like I'm numb, just on autopilot, and never ever taking a break for myself. And when I did ever, I would feel this sense of guilt of like, what are you doing? You need to work. And so it became this just vicious cycle of me self-sacrificing in the name of achievement, in the name of perfectionism, in the name of others' peace. And meanwhile, I was internally suffering, feeling like I had no peace within myself because I was trying to keep the external world in a place where it was all taken care of and steady, but yet it was myself that was paying the toll for that.
That's really important. The fear response or the people pleaser response and all of these type of responses. How did this show up in your physical body? Because usually when there's fear, there's stress, there's people pleaser, it really impacts the body.
Yeah, absolutely. With all this, I didn't even realize this was part of my journey, but in my early 20s, I lived with an eating disorder for 6 years, and that was just a coping mechanism for all the internal struggles I was going with, and I didn't realize that at the time. And then as I really stopped engaging in those behaviors, I realized I had never ever healed within myself. I was still carrying those energies with me. And in my 20s, I experienced chronic back pain. So I had chronic back pain for many, many years. And at the time, it was before I was a physical therapist, before I was aware of all the aspects that contribute to that, I was going through all the mechanical ways. I was going to practitioners and having practitioners saying, well, your disc height at L4, L5 is half of what a 25-year-old disc height should be. Like, there's nothing we can do. And, you're just going to keep progressively getting worse. I've had practitioners say that to me. So there became even more of a fear response in me of like, I'm 25, like being athletic and being active is important to me. And here I'm looking at my back that I'm being told is only going to progressively get worse. And so I dealt with chronic back pain way into my 30s. And it was only when I started pursuing my own healing journey and realizing that there was something deeper to this and more of a root cause to this, that's when I started to release that back pain. And I am speaking today, I have no back pain. I do all the things I want to do. I've done triathlons, half marathons. It does not impact me anymore. But at that time, there was a long stretch where I felt like this is the rest of my life. And how am I going to live like this?
Mm. So maybe the root cause was maybe carrying around those burdens. What was that root cause for you? Because I know a lot of us are dealing with guilt, shame.
Guilt is something that the more I learn about myself and I really done like a lot of inner child healing, I see how I have just carried guilt throughout my entire life in every situation, feeling like I'm always in trouble for something or I'm gonna be in trouble for something. And that if I don't live in this fine line of how things should be, then there's something wrong with me, that I'm not enough. And so I carried this guilt and shame throughout so much of my life and in nearly every situation that I look back on, that I always had this sense of pressure that I had to be the one to carry the weight of responsibility in relationships, carry the weight of responsibility in taking care of everything. And that weighed heavily on me. And I think for me, when I didn't take care of myself in so many ways, there also built up this resentment towards myself. And I realized that too. I think I knew that I wasn't honoring myself, but didn't know how to get out of that trap. I felt like I wanted more in my life, but I was kept going back to the same cycles that I was in, the same patterns I was in. And I think that very much played a role in that back pain that I was experiencing.
Mm. Yeah, it's really important for a lot of issues. We think that we're constantly broken, that we need to be fixed. But I think a lot of this comes down to trust issues,
Mhm.
trusting
Yeah,
ourselves.
absolutely. Yeah, and that was something that I had struggled with. I was like the queen of self-doubt. Like I would second guess myself, and it showed up in so many ways. I would study so hard for a test, and then I would pick the right answer, cross it out, and then pick another answer because I doubted myself. And then I'd be frustrated with getting the answer wrong because I doubted myself. Like it was just like those little things that like just accumulated everywhere I went. I doubted myself and was like, not ever really trusting my path, not ever trusting that I had the right answer, always looking outside myself for somebody to validate what was right for me. And so that sense of feeling like I needed that external validation, either through grades or money or people saying what was right for me, I was addicted to it. I needed it. I needed to be productive. I needed to be able to cross things off the checklist. And yet I never turned inward to be like, you're good. Like you got this. Didn't even know how to do that, and that's something I'm still learning every day is like, "Okay, how do I trust myself in this moment, and how do I really honor myself?" I think that's really part of my soul's journey is how to love and trust myself.
Right. It creates a snowball effect. It keeps it bigger and bigger and bigger as we keep adding to it, but we're not realizing we're adding to it. So how do you stop that snowball from growing, saying, nope, no more of this?
Yeah, it's been an ongoing journey of just realizing I think the biggest thing was when I was learning about subconscious beliefs and realizing like I had no idea about subconscious beliefs. So I was literally just running on autopilot. And then when I started learning about subconscious belief and further understanding myself, like what is running this ship? And then I'm starting to see all these things that were patterns in my life from early childhood to teenage years to college and beyond. I kept seeing these patterns and I'm like, this has got to be it because it is just going on this cycle. And I keep on living with the same belief systems. It's maybe showing up differently in my life, but it's the same kind of pattern and beliefs that keep coming up in my life. And so it was really turning the mirror back on myself and realizing that it's me that I have the power within myself to change this. And it's only when I can self-reflect and realize that I have the awareness to do that, that I could start making these changes. And it was questioning some of those beliefs, diving into it with curiosity and saying, like, what is it about this that I believe this? Is this true? Does this serve me? And it was all these questions that I would ask myself. Those questions started to dismantle those beliefs that were holding on so strong, piece by piece.
Yeah, there's a really important question for people to ask themselves when you're feeling lost in this hamster wheel called life. Just stop, say, what is running this ship? Who's in charge? And
Yeah.
then to be curious, I think that's also the biggest aspect that I'm seeing in life is curiosity, that we don't have enough curiosity, that we're taking things at face value. So I think it's really important to question everything. Be like a small child. Why this? Why this?
Yeah, and I think that's too is like, I have 2 small kids. I have a 5-year-old and a 2-year-old, and I think for me, it's like, I can see how unless you break cycles, these beliefs and patterns will just get carried on to the next generation, and it's like, I know the things that I've struggled with in my life, and I don't wanna put that on my kids, so it's my responsibility to heal myself and to do my own journey, my own healing journey, my own pattern recognition, and break down those patterns so that my kids don't have to carry those burdens. If I can give my kids a gift, I think that's the biggest thing, to be the best, most healed version of myself so that they don't have to deal with the unhealed versions of me.
Unhealed version of you, that they don't have to deal with that.
Mhm.
So that's really important. It's also just to be like the kid. They don't accept anything as face value. They're always asking questions. That's really good. But to honor that self within yourself, I need to step into my full strength so my kids will be reflecting
Mhm.
that. And this is interesting. I'm not sure if you're familiar with Dr. Gabor Mate. What
Mhm.
he
Yeah.
discovered was, and what got him onto the road after being a pediatrician, was this huge journal study of 10,000 asthmatic kids. He
Mhm.
found that there was a direct correlation in this journal where stressed out parents equals asthmatic kids. There was a direct correlation, and he said everyone ignored it. So he got on the road with that.
Yeah, I've heard him talk about that study, and I think that's absolutely fascinating. I think there's so much truth to that, that so many energetic patterns are carried from generation to generation, and they just manifest in different ways, and I think that's fascinating and so truthful.
Yeah, and your kids are really fortunate to have a mom like you. She's taught us to how to stand in us, because these are really important skills you're going to need through school with all the judgment, all the criticism, where you start learning to not trust yourself.
Mhm, absolutely. Yeah, and it's like, not that I have it all figured out, but if I'm better today than I was yesterday, then I can carry that on to them and teach them some of these things and these self-care things, and that it's okay to stand up for yourself. It's okay to have a voice. It's okay to create some tension amongst relationships if it means that you're gonna live by your values, and that's something that I'm only learning now, and so if they're learning that younger, hopefully it sets them up for a better trajectory than some and not have to go through some of the struggles that I did with that.
Right. And so are you finding the impacts with your husband as well as you're going down this journey?
It is, and that's what I say to him all the time because when we got married, I was a very different person, 7 years ago than I am today, and I thank him because he's always willing to grow, and I think that is the most amazing part of our relationship is that we recognize the importance in growth. At the time when we got married, I didn't realize how important that was, so I'm so grateful that chose somebody who is always willing to grow, willing to recognize things within themselves and also be along with me in my growth journey and support me in that. And so I really couldn't have done what I've done without his support. And so yeah, I'm so grateful for that. And I think our relationship is better for it.
Yeah, that's an important point, because when I really flipped the script on my life, I was in a long marriage. It just ended because we were just completely different realities. She's still in the victimhood world, and I was like, nope, I got this.
Yeah. And I think that's an important thing to bring up with relationships because I've had 2 very close relationships in my life where it was that dynamic of being a victim, and I'm no longer willing to tolerate some of that in my life. I've changed, and it kind of caused that separation. And so it caused an external unraveling of those relationships, but yet I don't know how it could be any other way because I'm not willing to not grow.
Yeah, to have somebody that's willing to grow with you is so critical. And that's going to, once again, impact your children and maybe potential future grandchildren.
Mhm. Yeah, I hope so. That would be my dream for them, just to give them some basis of how they can navigate this life, recognize that there's going to be failures and challenges, and how do you navigate that with a love for yourself. That's something I'm only learning now. You're going to come up on extremely hard times in your life. That's inevitable. We can't change that, but how can we love ourselves through it? I think that's the biggest gift you can give yourself, you can give anyone around you is how do you love yourself even though things may be unraveling in tremendous ways in your external world.
Mm. Another strong point is loving yourself. I think it starts with acceptance. So how
Yeah.
does one begin to accept themselves that they know what to do?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think it's a very individual journey. And I think for me, the acceptance started to come when I realized I could accept both the darker parts of myself and also the lighter parts of myself. And then that is all me. And I think that was a big eye opener to be like, okay, I don't have, like for me with perfectionism, I was rejecting anything that wasn't, quote, perfect. And I think for me, when I started to realize that, like, okay, here's a side of me that are are challenges I've had, and I'm gonna love myself for that. These are some maybe thoughts I've had, and I'm gonna love myself for that. But I'm just going to accept that I am everything on the spectrum. So it's not just only accepting the quote good parts, it's also accepting some of the not so good parts and realizing that that's all you. And so that became an evolutionary process. I think I'm still on that. I can't say I'm 100% accepting of all of me, but I'm a heck of a lot further along in it than I was a few years ago. And I think that's part of that journey that we have to go on is just recognizing and seeing myself from a removed perspective. What I'd like to do is see myself from my soul's perspective of like, wow, I can see you from the outside and realize like you're going through something here. You're having this thought, you remove yourself a little bit from the situation, and then it gives you a different perspective. And I think that's really helped me have more self-compassion of like, gosh, if somebody from the outside saw what I'm dealing with or experiencing right now, like I would just want to hug that girl, for going through that. And it's allowed me to see myself and my journey from a different perspective.
Another important reminder that journey is never done. One challenge after another challenge, but you get these practices, so you get stronger and stronger as you go
Yeah.
through. So
Mhm.
what are the practices that you recommend as like a meditation, a self-inquiry? What's your go-to?
Yeah, so I have a whole routine throughout the day, but I usually just wake up with some sort of prayer, showing gratitude for all the people in my life, asking for wellness, protection, and joy for us all. And I do a visualization of them being encapsulated in the glowing light and being loved. So that's what I start my morning with. I do some deep breathing, before even getting out of bed. So connect with my breath. I read every single day. So I'm always reading, always learning new things. And that's really been such a transformative part of my journey in doing that. And then at night, I sit in meditation. So I just sit quietly and I connect with the soul part of myself more. So I just ask for guidance and for my spirit guides to guide me in whatever struggles I'm going through that day. Movement too. I'm always moving. So I'm doing some kind of movement, just connecting with my body. So that's been a really big part of my journey too, of not just exercise, but slowing it down, connecting with myself. And that's been a really big part.
Yeah, movement with presence, really connecting to that deeper essence is
Mhm.
so important. So it's really a good breakdown for everybody to really stand in their power or a potential way they can do that. Start off with gratitude, some kind of intention for the day, and then moving through the life is a living practice. So it was interesting before we started this conversation when you were really dealing with the therapy and things of this nature, how broken this system was. And you're like, I need to do something different. So
Mhm.
let's talk about this a little bit. How are you seeing how the system isn't really serving us?
Yeah, so I found it very frustrating. Like I'm a physical therapist, worked with primarily older adults towards the end of actually working as a physical therapist, but I just found that many of the people I was working with felt very disempowered. And I think the overall feel of it was looking outside themselves for someone to fix them, looking outside for someone to give them a solution, to just move past it and kind of looking for like a quicker fix for me felt just misaligned and didn't feel like I was best serving my clientele because with the current system, you get paid for whatever the reimbursements are and whatever insurance will say that you can get paid for. And so you're kind of held to that standard. And so you can't just deviate and be like, okay, let me treat you with this. Let's dive into this part of you. Let's really look at the root here. You don't necessarily get paid to do that. So that became very constrictive where you could almost sense that there was something more going on, but you can only get to the surface level of treating people. And so for me, it was like there's deeper root causes. And I think going through my journey of realizing the emotional impacts of my own chronic back pain and then seeing people who were experiencing pain, but we're relying on opiates to just get through the day, or just going through that roller coaster of like they feel good for a few hours and then they're right back to where they were. There's no longevity of healing. And so for me, having that understanding of like, wow, I've come far and where I was from having chronic back pain to where I am now, there's more to this. And I want to help people get to that level and not just put a Band-Aid on a gushing wound. And so that really became my big drive in creating my own practice where I can help people in a deeper way.
Right, because as you said before, you were the queen of self-doubt, and
Oh,
you saw
totally.
probably people that you were treating that were also the queen or king of self-doubt. It's like, I could do more to help them. They're paying me to
Yeah.
be a therapist.
Yes, 100%. Like, and I've always been like a more holistic person. Let's treat the whole person. I just was dealing with the physical aspects, but really a lot of those physical aspects are symptoms of something that's going on deeper. And so I think as I gained a better understanding of that, I'm like, oh my gosh, like there's so much more that can be done. I'm thinking of one client I had who was dealing with so many health issues, and there were a lot of deeper issues that she was going through. It was only when I started asking about that I realized that helping her stand is great, but it's not going to be getting at what she really needs.
Right, because you're probably going to treat her, and you might see her again in a year for the same issues because the underlining root was not addressed.
Exactly. And so it just continues to bubble up. And that's the power of our body. Our body is an information source. It's trying to communicate something to you. So pain is communication. Any ailment that our body is expressing is some sort of communication of showing something that's going on deeper under the surface. But if we just ignore it, suppress it, or put a band-aid on it, then we're just perpetuating the cycle of whatever's going on. And inevitably it will continue on in that direction.
It comes down to that they're externally focused. They're not focused, what's going on with me?
Mhm.
Why am I feeling this way? And
Exactly.
addressing those issues by just being, once again, curious. I know
Mhm.
when I was stuck in the medical system for 38 years, I don't think I was curious enough. I just accepted, like, okay, the doctors know what's best for me. And my health was getting worse and worse and worse
Mhm.
until I stopped and say, wait a second,
Yeah.
what's going on here?
And just to realize that you have so much power within you to heal and to really be your biggest advocate and to recognize and dive deep. Like no one understands you more than you know yourself. And it's like we are so quick to relinquish authority to somebody else. And it's only when we take back our own authority that that's when we can truly start to see some of these changes. And it doesn't mean that we don't need external help, but we need to realize that we have the responsibility to ourselves and that we can seek out resources for that help. But at the end of the day, it's really our ability to be able to say, yes, that's for me. No, that's not for me. Trust in that process and know what is going to bring you towards that end goal of what you're seeking.
Yeah, being an advocate for ourselves. Look at this patient that had chronic back issues. You did the right exercises, got her back strong, but maybe her back started to act up again in 6 months. So maybe she said, wait, I got this back issue again. I'm doing all these exercises and practices.
Mhm.
What else is going on here?
Mhm. Yeah, exactly. And then that sparks that curiosity. But I think unfortunately many people will go through all the effort of getting their back in a better place, navigating the pain, they feel a little bit better. It comes back. And a lot of times people will put that on what is wrong with me? And that becomes the question they ask themselves rather than approaching it with the curiosity of like, okay, did I miss something? Is there more to this? And creates that deeper cycle of people then thinking that maybe they're uncurable or they can't be helped or there's something special that with me that this just doesn't work for.
Mm. Such an important question, too. What's wrong with me? It's really the wrong question because that's part of
Mhm.
self-judgment and criticism. And I
Yep.
feel with self-judgment and self-criticism, they get autoimmune diseases.
Mhm.
Oh, something's going on with the body. What's going on here? I'm not doing anything wrong.
Exactly. Yeah. You are the power of the questions you ask yourself. So if you are going to ask those questions, your subconscious mind is going to find an answer to that. If you're asking, what's wrong with me? It's going to find answers that are more negatively driven. But yeah, if you ask questions that are say like, what are you trying to tell me? What is the information in this? What are my next steps? Something that is going to be more promoting of health, your subconscious mind can get to work with that. And that changes your trajectory.
Asking the right questions and because the answers will always be there. You can let
Mhm.
go of this external validation that the answer has to be out there someplace. You have your answer. But once again, it comes down to trusting that answer, because the mind is filled with.
Mhm. Exactly, and I think a big part of that for me, like, with that trust is, like, what does it feel like when it's your mind versus, like, what if it's truth? And, like, I started to realize, like, the difference of, like, my mind feels, like, very, like, jittery, agitated, kinda like urgency, and so being able to differentiate, like, "Oh, that's my mind," versus, like, truth felt very, like, calm, neutral, subtle, and that's how it felt in my body. So the more I could get in tune with my body and realize, okay, like my mind makes me feel this way, that's my mind speaking, versus when I was in tune with myself and truth felt very different. And that's really helped me learn to trust myself in the process.
Yeah, it's another good point too. If you're feeling anxious, stressed, worried, feared, that's not the answer.
Mhm. No, exactly. And then if you go down that route of the mind, you get into those vicious cycles again. So it's yeah, but it takes time to sit quietly with yourself, and that was really a struggle for me for many, many years. Sitting quiet with myself felt so uncomfortable, but I realized that it takes practice to do that. And that's what I like realized is giving myself grace in that process because for me sitting quietly felt so like fear provoking, so like uncomfortable, so difficult for me. And so it just, you have to start small and build on that. And that became a big eye opener for me to give myself grace in that process.
Yeah, sitting quietly is difficult for many individuals because
Mhm.
we're so caught up in the mind. And part of the sitting quietly is learning to be present because you're either in present or in the mind. So if you can't sit quietly, it's an indication that you're not fully in this moment. So where are your feet? Where are your hands? Where are you sitting? I did quickly discovered though that I have thoughts, but I'm not my thoughts.
Mhm. Yeah, and that's such a big eye opener when you have that because I thought I was my thoughts for most of my life, and my thoughts were not pretty. So I literally had that image of myself thinking everything that's in my head must be true. But when I realized that it's not true and it's not serving me, that was really eye opening for me to change in what I was trusting.
Yeah, to me, it was a big aha moment when I
Mhm.
discovered I had thoughts, but I wasn't my thoughts. Because our negative thoughts are deadly. That's why we could commit suicide. And I nearly was in that place twice, taking this chatter as my truth. And my psychiatrist never once said to me, because once again, this broken healthcare system, he never said, "Why are you taking thoughts as truth?
Mhm.
Let's reframe it this way. Here's some medicine." But
Mhm.
reframing is just chasing thoughts with more thoughts.
Yeah, right, exactly. And then you just get into this like intellectualizing cycle of just perpetuating, especially if you're someone who ruminates.
And all of us ruminate. When life isn't going right, we all sit in our own stew and not realizing that we're making it worse.
Mhm, exactly. Yeah, and I think also too, it's like for me, even though I'm further along than I was years ago, like I still get in rumination cycles. I still have to go through those practices to pull myself out of it. So I think it's just understanding like that is it's natural to do that, but you don't stay there as long and you don't go quite as deep when you really work on yourself.
Right, because it's just life is a practice. The more you practice, because life happens, a challenge is going to come your way, and you have to give yourself a timeout. It might take a week, 2 weeks, a month before you're like, wait a second, I'm getting caught in this
Mhm.
challenge in life. How do I get back to my practice of being me?
It can be really tough. Sometimes we have this expectation that things are linear. They should always be getting better and better. But you do get in these ruts when I have really stressful things come in my life. I'll tend to go back to that more familiar pattern. And I have to recognize that, okay, and here I am again, self doubting, trying to be perfect, controlling scenarios, trying to make sure everything is all controlled in the external environments. I know those patterns in myself, so I can put a kibosh to it. But you do tend to go back to what's most familiar, especially in stress provoking experiences.
Right, because you might be lost in, say, for a week, 2 weeks, a month, who knows? But eventually you'll see, oh, this is life happening again.
Yeah, and I feel like sometimes life gives you those challenges to test you. Can we pull you back to that space of, like, that love and the trust for yourself? But it's like, if you didn't have those challenges, you wouldn't strengthen that aspect of you where you are anchoring into your own authentic self.
Yeah, it's really interesting how the mind anchors itself back to familiar patterns. Like I can take somebody in a really high, like 8, 9, 10 level pain down to a 2, 3,
Mhm.
and I'll give them this meditation, this practice to keep it away. If I don't, the next day the pain's right back because mine's like, hey, where did that go?
Mhm. Yeah, exactly. Because that's a sense of certainty and safety. It's familiar, and that's what our brains love is certainty and safety. And so even if it doesn't serve us, it's going to pull us right back to that because it's more predictable. Whereas if you do something that's unfamiliar, it's less predictable. And that becomes actually a more safety concern for your nervous system than the familiar, uncomfortable things.
Right, because it's also an interesting aspect for me when it gets from a really high level pain to a really low level pain, then like, oh, there's a mental component here.
I mean, your pain is in the brain, so it's all your perceptions and everything that is contributing to that. Mhm.
Right. So it's really interesting how the mind works. It's very powerful, but also is an indication that pain is an indicator that something isn't right, either the
Yeah,
mind or the body.
exactly, and that's a big differentiator is, like, understanding that pain is information. A lot of times, the natural response be like, "I'm in pain," then you can get into that fear response of being like, "What's wrong?" And then going down the slippery slope of anticipating everything that could be happening. So it's powerful when you realize it's just information. Like, listen to the information, and if you feel acknowledged, your body will calm itself down.
Yeah, because it's really interesting, this power of mind. Like I had multiple sclerosis and I
Mhm.
don't have it anymore, which really puzzled my doctors because I was so stressed out and overwhelmed with life. MS is an autoimmune disease. What was I doing? Attacking myself constantly.
Oh my gosh, it's incredible, and, like, what a testament to anybody who is going through any kind of autoimmune disease to realize that, like, it doesn't necessarily have to be forever. And I
Right.
think just you sharing your story is powerful and realizing how powerful your mind is and it being able to heal yourself in that way.
Dealing with MS, everything. If I stop back and say, wait a second, who's running this ship? As you mentioned before, who's running this MS show?
Yeah, and what was it for you that was running that?
In thoughts. I was not
Mm.
aware of this moment. I was completely lost in thoughts. I was
Mhm.
completely like, I am my thoughts, I am my body.
Mm.
And when I realized I'm the witness of the mind and the witness of the body, but I'm actually that vibrant soul, once
Mhm.
I knew myself as vibrant soul, everything went away.
Mm. Wow. It's amazing. It's absolutely I love stories like that because I believe in the power of the mind, but when you hear stories like that, it just solidifies that and how powerful it is and empowers hopefully people to realize you have so much ability to create healing in your life and change your whole trajectory in your life.
Yeah, a lot of the mind was just getting rid of the resistance of the mind. The mind attaching on to that incurable story or whatever story that is. I'm not good enough. I'm not worthy. That I'm stuck with this rest of my life. You can find a million and one articles saying you're incurable, but why is that your truth?
Mhm.
Did
Mhm.
that come from you?
It's like we all have that light, but how much stuff is on top of that light that
Yes.
is smothering it. It's like once we can excavate that stuff, it's like the light was always there and it was always on.
Yeah, it would be amazing if you were a therapist today and you were actually able to go outside the lanes and really help people
Yeah.
holistically. Like, I'm just a PT, so I can only do this.
And I think that's, like, why I created what I've created because I wanted to help people on a deeper level and not just as at a more physical level.
Yeah, speaking of creating, you have this new membership program that you're creating now that's going to help people.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm launching a new membership in January, which I'm so excited about, but it's the Infinite Self Circle. And so it is for women who self-abandon and deal with the health impacts of stress and who maybe sometimes know the right thing they need to do, but don't have that space being held for them to actually implement the things. So I find that a lot of people, we're an information overload society. Everybody can find whatever information they want in any resource, but I find most people have the difficulty in actually implementing it, embodying it, and allowing themselves to be transformed by it, creating that membership to give people a space to really support each other, implement those things, and actually transform their life, not just know what they need to do.
Right. That's such a good title, Infinite Self, because we are infinite, but we're limited in our thinking. We create
Mhm,
a finite version of ourselves that isn't the greatest expression of ourselves. So this is
exactly. Yeah, so you can find everything on my website. It's optimalu, Y-O-U, healthandwellness.com.
okay, great. So that's how they can reach out for you. If they're listening to this, so they have any questions, they can just find you on your website and ask questions and join your community and step into them. Was that the optimal you?
Optimal you, yeah, exactly. The most enlightened, beautiful version of yourself that's there, just realizing it.
Right. And having the different practices in there so they can really be the best version of themselves.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's I always use the Dorothy, the Wizard of Oz, analogy that we can always come home and to ourselves. We just didn't realize we had the power to do it. And it's like she had her ruby slippers the whole time. It was only when she realized that she could click them, she could have gone home at any point. And we all have that power within ourselves, but we just are sometimes blinded to it and don't realize that we have that power. Once you open your eyes up to realize how much you have within you, that's when your life changes.
I love that, the ruby slippers. You
Yes,
have the power.
you have it all along. Just you don't realize how powerful you are.
Yeah, and that's really important because society has taught you that you're not powerful.
Hmm.
Look at all the stuff they're trying to sell you. Do you
Hmm.
really need
Yeah.
that?
There's a lot of money to be made by you feeling like you're not enough. A lot of money to be made. And that's the unfortunate thing is that a lot of messaging is going to make you feel like you need something outside yourself to be enough because of the money that's there to be made.
And that remind ourselves that we have the magical slippers. We have
Mhm,
whatever magic it is within us.
mhm, absolutely.
Well, Kelly, it's been great to have you on the conversation. So thanks for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me. I truly enjoyed this.